Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. We're here for this week's Know Your Foe episode. We're looking forward to that Chargers game on Sunday. And joining me is Jamie Hoyle of the Lightning Round podcast. Jamie, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Ken. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely. It came recommended, so that's always good. I want to, a lot of people now in Baltimore have seen the 5 or 6 minute post-game press conference given by Staley after the last game, and it really seemed like a coach on the edge. Can take us through that a little bit in terms of what you saw from it?
Yeah, I actually think he's been on the edge for quite a while. One of the team's beat writer for The Athletic, Daniel Popper, has been a lot of questions about how the loss to Jacksonville in the playoffs has impacted this season. Basically, after every game, he's asking him some version of the question of, do you think the loss to Jacksonville is spilling over into this season and causing you to lose these close games? And I think that's kind of set him on the edge. And I think we all know, his defense isn't working, which was his calling card coming in. And everything with the exception of really Justin Herbert seems to be crumbling around him in a lot of ways.
Is that the guy who asked the question, obviously, about are you going to relinquish defensive play calling? It sounded like, and because he said, you don't have to ask that question ever again. Did you hear that?
I believe it was.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So he's been getting a lot of questions about relinquishing defensive play calling. And that is, like I said, that was his calling card when the Chargers hired him. Mm-hmm. I'm sure it's what he feels makes him different and makes him unique. It hasn't turned out that way, but that's what he thinks. So of course he's not going to give it up. He's going to cling to that because he feels like, I'm sure it's going to turn at any second. So yeah, he's definitely been on the edge for a while.
The other thing that's made him very unique since he came to the NFL is going forward on fourth down and some fourth and sizables. He's very driven by the extreme right edge of the analytics group. That would go. Has that continued as much into this season, or has it slowed down at all?
I believe off the top of my head, they've gone fourth down 15 times.
That's a lot.
On those lines, 15, 16. Okay. I don't have the stat right in front of me, but I think it's somewhere in that neighborhood. He is not as aggressive as he was in year one. Last year, he really backed off of going for it on fourth down. He goes for it when he feels like going for it is going to directly impact the game, is the best way to put it. He'll tell you he leans on the numbers and on the analytics. So, if he feels like getting a fourth down is going to put a game away in the fourth quarter, he's probably going to go for it. If he feels like getting a touchdown in a certain spot is going to change the game dramatically, he's going to go for it. Not as aggressive as he was, but certainly in fourth quarter and goal-to-go situations, he will roll the dice, just depending on the situation and what the numbers say.
So what was true in 2021 when the two teams last met was that he was big on going forward on 4th and 3 and 4th and 4 from the minus yard line locations, where it's very unusual to do it. I don't, I'm a mathematician myself. I don't feel like it's incorrect to do it. You're lopping a whole lot of variance into that play for a little bit of expected value. And I wonder, the Chargers in 21 anywhere were a pretty good team, at least when the Ravens met them early in the year. I don't know how they finished in 21. How did they finish?
They finished 9-8, I think, 10-7, something along those lines. And they wound up missing the playoffs.
Missing the playoffs. Okay. So
9-8. I believe they finished 9-8 and they missed the playoffs. So okay. Yeah, he isn't as aggressive in negative territory as he was in 2021. Like I said, he really backed off of the fourth down tries in a lot of what seemed like very obvious circumstances where you would really think he was going to go for it. He backed off. And in some ways, a lot of us thought maybe, he was being told by the front office not to go for it in certain situations because he took a lot of heat during the 2021 season from the media and after the season, basically saying that his decisions to go for it cost him a playoff chance, which I don't think was true personally. I think that's what made them unique. And then it's what made him unique. And he backed off of it. And now he's no longer unique and he's on the hot seat.
All it has to do is fail, and you get tons of questions. I thought that some of this would start to change with the advent of better mathematics and whatnot into the game. And, the Belichick 4th and 2 weekend many years ago now against the Colts. You remember that game at Zone 29 was the same weekend we saw a kneel kick for one of the first times. It's like very unusual to see kneel kick employed at the end of a football game, but Jacksonville did it. And since then, the Ravens have actually won, or not won. They've won one ball game and had another one, a chance to win a ball game with the other team not doing a kneel kick. So the Bears scored a touchdown when, if they had just knelt at the 1 yard line or the 5 yard line or whatever, they would have easily been able to kneel and kick the winning field goal. They scored a touchdown. The Ravens came back, got it tied, and went to overtime and won it. The second time, the Pittsburgh Steelers gave the chance to the Ravens to do it, but they didn't get it done. So anyway, I find this stuff fascinating. It's one of the things I really enjoy talking about in terms of the game. I will plug right now on the show. We've got a great 4th down math thing that I know is going to be something that's it's a little esoteric for this audience, but if you want to understand like where some of the real geekdom is going in terms of 4th down math, this guy and his name is Ryan Brill will be on Thanksgiving Day. So I'll point people to that one. Getting back to the Chargers now, let's talk about their offseason, the key changes to the Chargers team that came in this year to make them different from 22.
They didn't really make a whole lot of impactful free agent signings. They said goodbye to Drew Tranquill, who was their best linebacker. He wound up signing with the Chiefs. They brought in Eric Kendricks to replace him. That has not really worked out very well for them. They brought back Will Clapp as their backup center. Other than that, there weren't really a whole lot of big changes to the roster via free agency. It was kind of a quiet offseason. They went all in the previous offseason. They signed J.C. Jackson. They brought in Sebastian Joseph Day. They brought in Austin Johnson, really trying to fortify that defense. And it didn't really work. And they were up against the cap, and they had to restructure a lot of people. They restructured Joey Bosa. I believe they restructured Khalil Mack. They restructured Keenan Allen. So they were in more of a cost-cutting mode and really relied on the draft to fill some of those holes.
A lot of teams came out of the COVID years with a lot of cap shortage because of the overages that occurred there. Did the Chargers address those with a fair number of void years? Have a lot of void years on their current contracts? They don't
typically use a lot of void years. They've restructured Khalil Mack twice since they traded for him. Like I said, they restructured Joey Bosa. They're typically pretty conservative when it comes to, navigating the cap. They'll sign people. They'll build in, we call it ripcords, an out clause after 2 or 3 years to give them an opportunity to escape a deal once the majority of the guaranteed money has been paid. But they historically have not really gone with too much. And actually, I don't think they've ever had void years added to a contract. It's just not how they operate. They were just fortunate going into the 2022 season. They had a rookie quarterback on a rookie deal. So they had a ton of money to work with, and they went out and spent as much as they could trying to really make a run before his contract, his second contract hit and impacted the cap.
Okay. Are there any players who are at a key contract crossroads right now? And the one I'm thinking about is maybe Asante Samuel in terms of being, in case of him, he's a first-round draft pick, right? So he would just have to make a decision.
He was a second-round draft pick.
Oh, okay. So he's a candidate for extension as soon as the season's over because he's in his third year. Is he a guy, do you think they'll early extend, or do you think that they don't have the commitment to him that they might otherwise?
I think they're in a situation where they're probably going to have to extend him. They obviously traded J.C. Jackson and made a ton of money doing it. They're at a point now where Michael Davis's contract is just about up. He's a free agent at the end of this year, and he's playing horribly. Mm-hmm. Going into this offseason, I think a lot of people expected some sort of an extension from Michael Davis. He has played his way out of any possibility of an extension this year. And they don't really have a whole lot behind Asante Samuel Jr. They've got Jasir Taylor, who's been playing a lot of slot this year, has not played particularly well. Dean Leonard, who was also drafted late in the 2022 draft behind behind Jasir Taylor, who they are trying to roll out and get more reps for to see what he has going into next year. But they're going to be in a cap cutting mode going into next year in a lot of ways, have some very difficult decisions to make on some very high priced veterans. And because of that, if there is somebody who is a priority for an extension, it's probably Asante Samuel Jr. I think we'll see how things play out this year. And as we get more into the defense, we'll talk about some of the things that's happening with the personnel in the secondary starting this week in terms of competition, which is never something you want to hear going into week 12.
Yeah.
But yeah, Asante is probably the one guy that they're probably more than likely hyper focused on, I should say, trying to extend just because of the situation their secondary is in right now.
Okay, well, I tell you what, we'll wait. We'll leave that for the defense, but I definitely saw some things in terms of yards per target that are incredibly troubling about the San Diego secondary that I'm sure you'll be able to shed some light on. Let's jump right over the quarterback situation. What's new and different about Justin Herbert's game this year?
I think early in the year, there was some concern that he was not evolving in terms of being able to see the field and anticipating throws. He's staring guys down, holding the ball, taking sacks, struggling in some key situations. He had some good games, but there were some up and down games as well, and he was really struggling. I think the last couple weeks, we've seen him start to come out of that at least a little bit. Last week in particular, even though they lost, Herbert really took over the second half and the fourth quarter in particular of the Green Bay game. He was extending drives with his legs, anticipating throws, making some, what Justin Herbert does, some ridiculous throws with his arm strength and his athleticism. And he also showed something that we've never seen before, emotion. He's usually very even keeled on the field. They had a delay of game in the red zone late in the Green Bay game on Sunday, and he got pissed at his center, Will Clapp, and actually spiked the ball and chased him up down the line of scrimmage and screamed at him for not getting the ball to him fast enough. And Justin's usually very even keeled. So to see him show that level of emotion to me kind of speaks to him taking on that leadership mantle and starting to hold guys around him accountable. And then when you start to add the play, the on-field play to that, I think you're starting to see what the Chargers saw in him and what a lot of people see in him in terms of not just the physical ability, but now he's maturing emotionally and starting to take that leadership mantle.
Okay. All right. How is he as a field general? Does he move people around pre-snap? Does he make obvious checks? Do they like to get to the line of scrimmage quickly and move people? How is that?
It kind of depends on the game situation. So in terms of getting to the line of scrimmage quickly, they will play some, not hurry up, but they'll play up tempo after first downs. Doesn't necessarily mean they'll snap the ball quickly, but they'll get to the line quickly and give him time to adjust. He does have the ability to check in and out of plays. Something you'll notice during the game, I'm sure a lot of your fans, you said your fans are pretty nuanced and they understand the game. More often than not, if you hear Justin Herbert say kill, kill, kill at the line of scrimmage, he's checking into a running play.
Sure.
It's a pretty dead giveaway more often than not. Otherwise, he does move people around. I don't think he's at a point right now, at least from what I've seen, where he has free reign of the playbook to make changes at the line of scrimmage, but he does have checks he can make, and he is able to move people around and get them in position.
Mm-hmm. All right. Very cool. Let's move on. Talk about the offensive line, its current state. I usually like to go left through right. I've done a little research of my own on the line. I had some thoughts, but I want you to kind of take me through them.
Yeah. So left to right, you start with Rashawn Slater in his third year. He was an all-pro in his rookie year, was phenomenal. Missed most of last year with a torn bicep. Came back this year and took a little while to get into things. And then he got hurt in the Raider game, which I believe was week 4 off the top of my head. Had somebody roll up the back of his ankle, and he sprained his ankle. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's, quote unquote, short armed for a left tackle, but he generally wins because his hands are faster and his placement is better than defensive linemen. And he also has a ridiculous anchor. So even if you beat him with power off the line of scrimmage, he's generally able to drop that anchor and really sink into his hips and stop that bull rush. That has not been as much of the case this year as it had been in years past. I think it's got a lot to do with the ankle injury. He's just been banged up in his legs, and that kind of makes it difficult, obviously, to drop that anchor and sink into your hips.
Not to break into this too much, because I want to let you talk about the offensive line, but the Ravens at rush linebacker, obviously, I assume the Chargers are primarily right-handed, so Slater is often the naked tackle, uncovered tackle.
Yes, he's generally on an island by himself.
Okay, so then he probably gets Odafe Oweh, who is not only extremely quick, but very long-armed. Has he had a lot of experience playing against long-armed defensive ends or edge rushers who've given him trouble or not?
I think this year's speed has been more of an issue for him. Mm-hmm. Like I mentioned, he's had some issues dropping his anchor when he needs to, but both Chargers tackles have struggled with speed at times. In terms of long arm, I think Slater is so technically sound. His timing is so good and his hand placement is so good that more often than not, he will neutralize the long arms just because he's first.
Okay.
So it's not something that worries me. It wasn't something that worried me in his college tape, and it's not really something that worries me at this point in his career. And when I say short armed, I think his arms are maybe a quarter inch to a half inch shorter than, what people normally want. So it's not a huge deal, and he wins it with timing and technique. So not something that I'm too worried about. Their left guard is Zion Johnson. He's now entering his second year, almost through his second year. He's a guy who played right guard last year. Now he's playing left guard, which is his natural side. He has had his moments. He can be very good in the running game. When the Chargers run power with him and Jamari Salyer, their right guard, they can have a lot of success at times. He has struggled in pass protection quite a bit. It was an issue last year. It continues to be an issue this year. I think a lot of the issues in pass protection has been because they have been playing without their center, Corey Linsley, and Will Clapp has been playing center. And I just think they're struggling with communication. They're struggling with passing things off, and they're not identifying blitzes and stunts the way they would if Linsley was on the field. So what you're getting is a lot of leaks in the interior just because they're not seeing things. The center isn't seeing things, and they're not getting communicated properly, and they're just not passing off and executing on the interior.
This is the Ravens team is a team that lives and dies by the stunt this year. They've have stuck primarily the 4-man pass rush, but an unbelievable number of stunts. Does Herbert, do the typical routes the Chargers run allow the time to develop, or does Herbert have a number of quick outs, a lot of wide receiver screens, a lot of little swing passes to backs and whatnot, a lot of slants that get the ball out of his hand quickly, and so that the stunts are less effective because they do take time to develop? Is one of the things.
That's a good question. They do both. When they're picking up big chunks in the passing game, they're usually running a lot of crossers, a lot of digs, some posts, things like that. They haven't had a lot of success throwing the ball deep in terms of go routes down the sideline, but they'll attack the seams and they'll get behind the linebackers when they can. But in terms of short passing games, they have a pretty diverse short passing game. Obviously, they have Austin Eckler. They like to throw the ball to him out of the backfield quite a bit, both in terms of swing passes, screens, and he's an excellent route runner. He wasn't in Green Bay last week when he slipped in the final drive, but typically speaking, he's an excellent route runner out of the backfield. And they also run a very good horizontal passing game. They do have the slants and the quick outs. They'll run bubble screens, smoke screens, tight end screens, things of that nature to try to get the ball out quickly and let people create after the catch. So that they have ways to combat those sort of things if they're having trouble with the stunts. And I think you'll see some of that this weekend.
Okay. All right, great. So you got to Will Clapp, who's everybody's replacement level center. And
he's a warm body. I mean, I hate to say that about an NFL player, but he's not very good. He's not very good in terms of physical blocking and the mental recognition side of identifying blitzes, picking up stunts, things like that, is not great. So he's very much, in my opinion, a liability, mostly because of the communication issue, but also because of some of the physical aspect of it as well. And then on the other side of him, you've got Jamari Salyer, who is, I believe, a former 6th-round pick last year out of Georgia. And he played some left tackle last year, did a great job filling in for Slater. Now he's playing right guard, which is more his natural position, although he played up and down the line at Georgia. He's another kind of heavy-footed power guy, which is why they have so much success running power when they do. Again, a little plotting, can struggle a little bit with blitzes, stunts, and twists, and can have a hard time with really athletic interior rushers.
Okay. All right. So he's been not graded out too well, it doesn't look like, on PFF, for what that's worth. Is pass blocking? I mean, he's been at left tackle, filled in for Slater, and not been terrible. How's his pass blocking been at right guard?
Kind of like Zion Johnson, very up and down, to be honest with you. He'll have his moments. They'll have moments for the first 3 quarters of games where it seems like they're communicating well, and they'll kind of buck up, and the whole line will block well and give Herbert protection. But they've had major issues in the fourth quarter, particularly in the last 5 minutes of games, with pass protection breaking down. Something you'll see, I'm sure the Ravens have seen this on film. You can have a lot of success against the Chargers offensive line by overloading one side. It confuses things. They have a hard time handling extra bodies, and you'll almost always wind up getting a free rusher at the quarterback. It's something that opposing teams had success doing against Kellen Moore's blocking schemes when he was in Dallas. It has continued to be an issue with the Chargers, and it's not something that we've really seen any kind of a correction or a fix for. When they're in gotta-have-it situations, everybody's sending multiple people to one side. It doesn't matter if it's left or right. They can't handle the extra body, and somebody's coming through a gap and getting a free shot. Okay.
All right. Well, very good. There's 4-man rushes and 4-man rushes, and the Ravens use a lot of the complex 4-man situations where they drop somebody and overload a side, stunt, blitz somebody from off ball to get the extra rusher there. And especially if you're talking about getting the free runner, what they've got a lot of is slot corner blitzes this year. They have 6 sacks from their slot cornerbacks.
Wow.
So that's really unusual in terms of a thing. Derwin James, obviously would be the analog to who Kyle Hamilton is now. But anyway, we'll get to him a little later. Right tackle.
Right tackle is Trey Pipkins, former 3rd-round pick. He was a free agent at the end of last year. He had a career year last year, even though he was hurt a lot. Stepped up, played injured, played well in spots. And I think he got paid mostly because he far exceeded what were very low expectations for him going into the season. And he has not really lived up to his contract in the first year. He's another one who really struggles with speed. You can just see guys racing around him at times off the right side. He's been healthy this year. He's had a lot of injury problems throughout most of his career. He's been mostly healthy. He's been reliable in terms of he's available and he's on the field. They've just had, with him and Salyer, they've had some issues on the right side in pass protection and in the running game that they've just had a really hard time fixing.
All right. A lot of draft capital on that offensive line. Not 2 1s, but a 1, a 2, and a 3. Expensive free agent in terms of Corey Linsley, bringing him in. And then I guess the cheap guy is the right guard, right? So Salyer was a 6, right?
Actually, it is 2 1s. Slater and Zion Johnson were both 1st-round picks.
Oh, I forgot. Number 17 overall, right? He wasn't the 2nd-round pick. Woof.
Yep.
Okay, let's move on. We'll talk about the wide receiver core next.
So you're not going to recognize a lot of these names. The Chargers are really banged up at wide receiver. Obviously, everybody knows going in Keenan Allen. Arguably, he's definitely one of the best route runners in the league, if not the best. The guy just finds ways to get open and make plays. Hands are great. He's not a guy who's going to beat you deep. He's not really a guy who is going to make a ton of plays down the field unless it's in like the deep and intermediate crossing game, assuming you can find the time to run that. But he's a guy who's going to play out of the slot more often than not. They move him around, a lot of jet motion. They try to hide him. And he's generally making plays in that 0 to 10, 0 to 15 yard range. they're trying to find opportunities for him to make catch and run opportunities in the, up the seam, in the middle of the field, behind the linebackers. Obviously, if they're in the slot, they're trying to find ways to match him up with linebackers when they can. He is the passing game. I think he's having a career year. He's been phenomenal this year. He's 30 years old, I believe, I think he's entering a contract year, if I'm not mistaken. He might have 1 year left on his deal. Normally we'd have Mike Williams to deal with. He's hurt as usual. Josh Palmer, their third wide receiver, who was on his way to becoming a pretty big part of the passing game this year, is on IR. He's been on there for 2 weeks, so he's going to be out for a while. They drafted Quentin Johnston, who a lot of Chargers fans were really excited for. He's been very problematic. I'm sure you've seen the clips of him dropping the potential game-winning touchdown pass last week in Green Bay. He's had a lot of issues with drops. He's been out of position. He's, I think, in a lot of cases, not run the correct routes. He just has been really struggling picking up the NFL game. And they need him to step up because of the shape that the passing game, the wide receiver room is in right now. Then you've got Darius Davis, who was their 4th round pick in the draft this year, primarily a returner. They'll use him as a gadget guy. He'll play some running back. He'll take some reverses and sweeps and things like that. They haven't thrown the ball to him too much. He's small, a little on the slight side, and they just haven't really figured out how to get him involved in the passing game. But you will see him get the ball in the running game at times. And then they've got a couple guys that they called up last week who I think will be playing this week because of the shape the wide receiver room is in. Alex Erickson, who I think he's out of Florida, if I'm not mistaken. He's been on some practice squads. He played last week, and he played the majority of the snaps in his first NFL game. They basically played 3 wide receivers last week, and he was the 3rd wide receiver. And then Simi Fehoko, who they got from the Dallas practice squad a couple weeks ago, played 1 snap last week. And Jalen Guyton, who just came off the IR, but he did not play last week, was not active. Actually, he was active and didn't play, I think, who is their speed guy. He's the downfield threat that they really missed last year. They're trying to get him back up to speed, but he has not been productive in his limited time back.
Okay, so I've got some questions at wide receiver. I want to go back to Allen for a second. Has he been lining up a lot in the slot, or lines up all over X, Z, X, Y, Z, whatever?
He is their primary slot receiver, but he will line up all over. They will move him around to try to create matchups and get him in space. Okay,
so he's a gigantic receiver. So he's like a modern big slot, you would say, at 6'2", 211 roughly in terms of his size. And the Ravens have been doing a lot of moving Kyle Hamilton up to play the nickel. In fact, it's really the position where I think he can be the most impactful to the Ravens. And I think it makes sense, kind of like Derwin James. You want him close to the line of scrimmage with the opportunity to make plays rather than kind of hiding him back at strong safety where you don't know if he's going to get involved in a lot of plays. Has he had any trouble with bigger slot corners or ever faced anybody like that who'd be a kind of a larger slot?
He can struggle with press at times. Because he isn't overly explosive and he relies on his releases and his footwork to get open. When bigger corners get their hands on him and press him, he can have a hard time creating separation. So that'd be something to look out for. I don't think it's necessarily a size thing, just so much as guys just jamming him up and not letting him off the line of scrimmage.
Does that have an impact on Herbert? When timing is off on a play, does that tend to mess up Herbert, or is Herbert pretty fluid in rereading and regauging the field as a play develops?
This is kind of a cop-out of an answer, but I would say it depends. There are times when Herbert is excellent at getting through his progressions and finding the open guy and getting the ball out, and there are times where he is zeroed in on Keenan Allen and the ball is going to Keenan Allen, whether it should or not. And that's just the way it is. And a lot of times what you'll see when that pops up, it's usually because Justin doesn't trust the pass protection. They're getting to him early in the game. They're creating pressure. They're moving him off his spot, and he's just going to go to the guy that he trusts because, I just went through the names of all the receivers, and you recognized what, 2 of them?
Yep.
So it makes sense that he's going to want to go to the guy that he trusts, the guy that he's played with since he was a rookie. But yeah, there are definitely times where Justin can be better getting through his progressions, anticipating, and just taking what the defense is giving him instead of relying too much on Keenan.
Is there a mind meld between those players? And we have the Jackson Andrews mind meld is well known here in Baltimore as being the most common bailout receiver on extended plays. And Jackson, of course, extends a lot of plays. So the question is with Herbert and the plays that he extends, does he really look for Allen more than normal, or does he have a single receiver that he's more likely to go to he trusts in contested catch situations?
I mean, he's going to trust Keenan. Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily call Keenan a contested catch guy. But if it's a broken play, if it's an extended play, he's getting out of the pocket. He's trying to find a way to get the ball to Keenan, although that doesn't mean that he won't look for other guys. We've seen him in spots roll right, and he'll find a broken play. He'll get the ball to Quentin Johnston, for example. It's just he'll throw to whoever's open once he gets out of the pocket, but he does want to get the ball to Keenan because he knows Keenan's going to make the play, and he doesn't know that about the other guys.
In terms of Johnston, he was drafted the very pick before Zay Flowers. So I think that certainly has been something that's kind of worked out for the Ravens because Flowers has been a big part of the offense. But was there a big divide among Chargers fans among what type of receiver they wanted at that spot, or even that they wanted a receiver at all in that first round of the draft?
I mean, there were some Chargers fans who wanted a tight end, but I think most Chargers fans realized this Chargers offense has been limited by a general lack of speed and explosiveness for a while. They have big, I don't want to say plotting, but not overly fast or explosive wide receivers, guys who have a hard time creating separation. And they needed somebody who could get himself open, somebody who could make people miss in the open field. I wanted Zay Flowers. I can tell you that. The guys on my co-hosts on our podcast, they all wanted Zay Flowers. It was something that we just felt was the perfect complement to what the Chargers had in their wide receiver room. And I just loved watching Zay's tape. I believe he was my number one receiver in the draft. So that was the guy that I wanted. And what we were told after the draft pick was the plan was to take Zay. But at the last minute, Kellen Moore said he had a plan for Quentin Johnston. He was going to be his CeeDee Lamb, and he had to have him to make the offense work. And they wound up going with Quentin Johnston, and we haven't seen any of what he thought he was going to do with him so far in his rookie season.
All right. Well, fair enough. Let's move on to either the tight ends or the running backs, whichever you'd like to do next.
Well, we'll go with the tight ends. It's another group of people that you're probably not going to recognize the names a whole lot. Jared Everett is their tight end one. He's been one of their more reliable weapons the last 2 years since he came to LA. He's not a guy who, necessarily strikes a lot of fear into a defense, but he has been their single best yards after catch option among the tight ends and the wide receivers. There's just a desire and a fight there after he catches the ball. He will run through and over people to get extra yards. You'll think he's down after 2 or 3 yards. He'll wind up with a 15-yard gain. He is banged up. He did not play last week. I'm not sure what his status is for this week. We shall see. But he's a guy that he's a big part of their short passing game, and they need him back, I think, in a lot of ways. Their tight end 2 right now is Donald Parham. He's a 6'8" freak of nature, came out of the XFL, and he's been a tease so far. He's now on his second contract with the Chargers. They'll scheme ways to get him open. They'll get him open in the screen game at times. They've started using him in the deep crossing game. And he is good with the ball in his hands after the catch. He's become a red zone weapon. I think he's got, I want to say 9 touchdown catches or something crazy like that in the last 3 years. And he's hardly ever on the field. So
I could stop you for a second. It looks like he's played a lot of snaps recently. I mean, I'm looking at
Aaron Rodgers' season is officially over, but yours has just begun at MyBookie. NFL, college ball, and a brand new cash out system gives you options to bet and win, all season long. First 2 legs of your parlay hit, cash out early and place another bet, or let it ride for a chance at an even bigger payday. Join us at MyBookie for an entire season filled with daily odd boost, same-game parlays, and huge prize pool contests. Right now, MyBookie has a no-strings-attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code RAVENS on your first deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly credited to your MyBookie account. That's promo code RAVENS to claim your cash bonus now. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie.
He's got 330 snaps on the year, and looks like I'd say he's played 32, 34 snaps a game from what I'm seeing here.
Yeah, he's been healthy this year.
Okay.
The last couple of years, he has not been healthy. He had a stinger at the end of the 2021 season, missed a lot of time during 2021, was off and on the field last year, I think with a calf injury and a couple other injuries. He's a guy who he'll go up and make a catch, but not a big fan of contact. And he tends to get hurt when he takes a hit. He's just been kind of fragile, although he has been durable and healthy this year. And he is, surprisingly, for a guy his size at 6'8" or 6'9", he's become a pretty decent blocker in the running game. Not great, but he'll generally be in the middle of a successful running play when he's on the field.
How are they? It seems like obviously there's could be a lot of reasons for this. Yards per target are at a career low for him this year at 6.2, and he had a 10.0 season last year. Any reason you can point to for the drop off when obviously it might have been a small sample size last year, maybe fewer snaps?
I just think it's more snaps and more targets.
Okay.
And it's just a function of the way the offense works. Like I said, they've struggled with pass protection at times, and they've had entire stretches of games where they've had to get the ball out faster on shorter routes. So They just haven't had the opportunity to push the ball down the field with him. And also dragged down by his impact in the red zone, because they don't run the ball really at all outside of the Miami game this year. They've had a really hard time getting any traction in the ground game, and they will throw the ball to Parham from the 1 yard line, from the goal line. So he has a lot of really short passes that are impacting the game, but they're just not using him down the field.
Okay, very good. That certainly could explain it. How about you move on to running back? Talk about a little bit about that.
Got one more tight end to talk about. It's Stone Smart. He's their tight end 3. He is their kind of pet project. He was a quarterback and a wide receiver. I'm trying to think of where he went to school. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but they just love the athleticism. He's 6'4", 6'5", and runs really well. And they are converting him into a tight end. He's developing as a blocker, had a couple real nice catches, a long touchdown catch and run in Green Bay last week. And he's kind of developing into a weapon up the seams when they need to get the ball, in that intermediate passing range behind the linebackers. A lot of times they'll look at him. Okay,
very good. He's Old Dominion, by the way. I don't know if you heard that when I
thank you. Yeah.
From, but running backs. One of the things I noticed is that this has been a team that's run for a very good number of yards per carry. Kind of what's behind that scheme wise in terms of doing it? Is that they have good yards after contact backs, or do they get a lot of level 2 opportunities to start with? What's creating a lot of this good yards per carry? Result.
I'm surprised to hear you say that, because it feels like they're always running for 1 or 2 yards.
And make sure I have it right. It's possible I don't. So, okay.
I think they're the worst running team in the NFL, if I'm not mistaken.
If I've got this wrong and I was looking at the Rams or something when I did it, that would be just like me, is all I can say. So we'll see. Go ahead and talk a little bit about the running backs before.
So the running backs, obviously, if you play fantasy football, if you're an NFL fan, their number 1 running back is Austin Eckler. Excellent at catching the ball out of the backfield. Until this year, he's always been very explosive in the screen game and in the running game. He had a protracted contract argument with the Chargers in the offseason, wanted an extension. They didn't give it to him, asked to be traded. They let him go out and shop himself. He could not find a trade partner or anybody who was willing to pay him. They came back and kind of restructured his deal and gave him a little extra money. But he did not get what he wanted. And he was very outspoken against about wanting to get paid, about how running backs are being treated. I don't know if you remember, there was a running back summit during the offseason.
Yes.
Where they got together and talked about the pay. And it came out that they were recommending kind of milking injuries as leverage to get paid. And it was suggested that Austin might have been the one that suggested that. That came out of that meeting, and he was one of the guys that led that meeting. Austin is not the same guy he's been. I believe he's going to turn 30 later this year. He looks slower. He had a huge slip and fall in the red zone and fumbled the ball that cost the Chargers a touchdown in Green Bay last week. Had a long run, which was really nice, but got caught from behind, which is not something we're used to seeing. He kind of looks like he's running with a piano on his back the last couple of weeks. Just looks very slow and stiff for whatever reason. Their running back 2 is Joshua Kelly, former UCLA running back. Eckler is the slasher. Kelly, I think in their eyes, is more of the power back. I wouldn't really call him a power back, but he's more of a one cut and go kind of a guy, downhill runner. Limited vision, not overly elusive. He's going to get to the second level, probably run to contact and get tackled. Not a great pass protector, not much of a receiver. And they have other running backs on the roster in Elijah Dotson and Isaiah Spiller, who was a 4th-round pick last year. Spiller's been inactive pretty much all year. I think he was inactive for 1 or 2 games.
Healthy scratch.
Healthy scratch. Yeah.
Wow.
No idea what's going on there.
Yeah.
They're having a really hard time grinding out tough yards. And Spiller is that 215, 220 pound back. He's built for the grind. For whatever reason, he can't get on the field. Not even on the field. He's not even active on game days, which is really frustrating.
They've never taken a chance with him and tried to drop him to the practice squad during this whole time, right? They've had him on the 53.
He's been on the 53, and he's been a healthy scratch pretty much his entire career outside of a handful of games.
That would be a very, very interesting player for the Ravens to go after this offseason. I'd say they're going to lose Gus Edwards, and I really liked him coming out of school. So we'll see about that. Have some questions though about the running backs.
Yeah.
So first of all, Jamie gave a completely unprompted piano reference. I just want to point out that was not me saying that. I talk about that all the time. The piano jumped us back, that kind of thing. But that was not me. We had a lot of problems with J.K. Dobbins, who participated in that same Zoom call you talked about last year. Had a lot of problems finishing runs, and he was leaving a lot of yards on the field at the end of play. Still great yards per carry number, but he had some pianos catch up to him at the end of runs and prevent him from getting into the end zone. I had not heard that about Eckler being one of the guys who had led this Zoom call. It seemed kind of ill-advised to be known publicly. If you want to have that kind of a cabal, you go to that, secret handshake club in New York City where you go 9 levels down and you meet there and you have the discussion. You don't make a publicized Zoom call about it that says, here are all the bad things we can do to try and make teams pay us more. It just seems tremendously ill-advised, in terms of.
I would agree. Yeah. You let something like that leak out and you're not getting paid.
Yeah. So,
and then people are always questioning if you're really hurt.
Uh-huh. That's exactly what will happen. In Dobbins' case, it's not really a question. He got injured in the very first game, and obviously all the Ravens fans know this, but I think his chance to return to the Ravens has gone to roughly 0. There is a slight chance more than it was that he would come back, because if he played out the season, he was definitely gone for significant money. I would have thought if he'd had a good season, but since he didn't, and he's only played, I think he's looking at a vet min plus incentives contract, and I don't even think it'll be with the Ravens, given the fact that Keaton Mitchell has really exploded onto the scene and been a ball player. So it'll be interesting to see that, and kind of troublesome to hear about Eckler. I looked up the Chargers' overall run game. Looks like they're right in the middle of the pack, 16th in the league at 4.1 yards per carry, which means they should do better against a Ravens team that unbelievably has shook off its roots of trying to be a run defense team first. And for the first time really in team history has said, we dare you. Go ahead and run the ball. Go try and get down the field on us and go a little slower. What we're going to stop you from doing is passing the ball. And they've allowed a team record lowest 4.18 yards per pass play, that's unbelievably out of kilter with the NFL currently, and 4.5 yards per non-kneel on the ground, which is also way out of kilter with the Ravens. The Ravens, for their first 20 seasons, did not allow opponents to carry for as much as 4 yards per play for the year. So this is not a team that's used to giving up yards on the ground, but they've now committed to it more or less with their too high shells, and are really I think that'll be one of the themes of this game is the Chargers will have to decide whether they're going to run against that or whether they're going to try and pass against it, which pretty much all quarterbacks have had trouble throwing down the field against these too high shells.
Yeah, I mean, that too high shell, go ahead and run it. We dare you to pass it. That's Brandon Staley's calling card as well. Mm-hmm. They try to run a very similar scheme. It's something he brought to the league with the Rams, and it seems like everybody runs it better than he does. So it's been very frustrating.
So in terms of where Derwin James plays in that cell, does that actually minimize Derwin James' impact by playing him exclusively on the back end? Because James really made his calling card as a great pass rusher in his rookie year, among other things. I mean, the guy's an incredible athlete, but certainly as a great pass rusher is one of the big things that people loved about him.
Actually, that's a great question, because that's something that we've struggled with for the last couple of years. Is he has been playing deep more this year than what we like. And it's really because Alohi Gilman's back there with him, and they basically have two strong safeties playing deep, and they need Derwin back there to cover for Alohi Gilman, because Gilman, he's great coming downhill and playing the ball in front of him. But once he's got to run, east-west or cover the deep part of the field, it really becomes a challenge for him. So Derwin's played a lot of too high this year. But that's getting ready to change. He played a lot of slot, what Staley calls the star in his scheme, last week in Green Bay. And Staley came out either yesterday or today and said they're taking Jasir Taylor off the field as the star, and that's going to be Derwin's role, which means now they're going to have Alohi Gilman and Dean Marlowe back deep. And Marlowe's been a godsend for them playing deep since they brought him up. I think it was during the Vikings game. It was either the Vikings game or the Raiders game. They brought him up for the practice squad for the first time, and he just kind of blended into the defense, which is exactly what you want to see from a free safety. He was everywhere he needed to be, almost had 2 or 3 interceptions, was just right on spot. So hopefully having him back there with Alohi Gilman allows Derwin to roam a little bit more, play that star, be on the line of scrimmage, and they can use him more as a blitzer, because yes, playing Derwin deep, that limits his effectiveness. He is much better, much more instinctive, much more dangerous playing closer to the line of scrimmage. The deeper he gets, the further away he gets from the line of scrimmage, the less effective he is. It was that way in college. It continues to be that way in the NFL.
So this is really interesting, because these are basically two teams which are moving exactly the same direction with their first round 14 and 16 draft picks, moving them up to basically play slot corner where they're most effective. Hamilton finished the year last year at slot corner and was absolutely outstanding. They still call him a safety in various ways, and they thought they would move him to strong safety this year. But when they did, it really reduces his impact on the game in terms of playmaking. And he like Derwin James, very long arm, looming presence underneath. Hamilton even more so because he's taller. That is very hard for quarterbacks even to throw over. And he's already had, against Pittsburgh, he had Pittsburgh. No, who was it? Against the Browns, he had the tip pass off Watson for the touchdown on a quick out. That was totally schemed up for exactly that result. By the way, he started off ball and came up, tipped the ball to himself like a basketball player, and took it right in on the second play of the game. But they've gotten so much out of him, including 3 sacks and a half against the Indianapolis Colts, going off the edge, that I don't think there's any choice that they can try and continue to put him on the back end. And Geno Stone has filled in, gotten 6 interceptions on the back end. Williams is now back healthy. So I think the pressure is going to be for that. I'm actually very concerned now. That's my biggest concern of the game, all of a sudden, that Derwin James is back up playing what I think is going to be his most impactful position. Listeners to this show will know I went absolutely ballistic when the Ravens did not draft Derwin James when he fell into their lap at number 16. I mean, it went absolutely ballistic on draft day. They traded down twice. They eventually got Hayden Hurst, who was not a particularly good play. But the whole draft was setting up on like they're going to get Derwin James because one of those two. And Minka Fitzpatrick, the other guy I wanted, ends up getting drafted at number, I think it was 11 by Miami. And then the New Orleans jumped right in front, of course, and they take Davenport, a pass rusher.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people thought they should have taken Lamar Jackson at that point. But anyway, Derwin James not going to the Ravens was a real blood pressure raiser in our household. I'll tell you.
Well, I'm glad he didn't, because Derwin James and that defense would have been a nightmare. That's something the league doesn't need to see.
All right. Well, let's continue talking, and let's maybe start with what I always like to do is in terms of how the team lines up to face opponents. Do they like to do on passing downs? Do they play nickel? Do they play dime? I know against Jackson in that 2018 playoff game, they famously played a ton of quarter, 7 defensive backs on the field for almost every play. What do they like to play normally on passing downs?
They play a lot of quarters and a lot of cover 6.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm talking package and not the coverage type.
Oh,
now.
My mistake.
So in terms of number of defensive backs, do they replace the weak side linebacker? Do they go to some kind of 31 up front or a 4-man front with 7 defensive backs behind that? Because that's what they did against the Ravens in that playoff game.
They typically are 4-man front with 2 linebackers. They play big nickel basically.
Okay.
5 defensive backs on the field. You don't see 7 on the field that often for them. Unless it's very matchup specific, or if a linebacker's hurt or something along those lines, they might sneak in a couple extra defensive backs. But more often than not, it's 5 defensive backs on the field. Up until this week, the 5 defensive backs were typically Michael Davis, Asante Samuel Jr., Jasir Taylor, Derwin James, and Alohi Gilman. I alluded to it earlier. Staley earlier this week said that they are basically opening up the secondary to competition because nobody is playing well. So what that probably means for this game is we already talked about Derwin playing more slot or star, which I think is his best position. It also probably means Michael Davis coming off the field and second-year player Dean Leonard taking his spot. Michael Davis is a guy who coming into this season we thought would be a critical piece of the Chargers secondary. We really expected he and J.C. Jackson to be outside with Asante Samuel Jr. inside. It did not play out that way. Even when J.C. Jackson was on the team and healthy, it didn't really play out that way. Michael Davis is a long, athletic press man corner, not great with change of direction. He's fast, but recovery speed isn't all that great. And once he gets beat, it's really hard for him to recover and change direction. So he has struggled. He's lost his press man skills. He's completely lost in the Chargers quarters heavy and cover 6 heavy scheme. And he's just not playing. He's been terrible. I mean, he looks like a completely different guy. If you watch the Chargers last year, particularly if you watch them against the Dolphins, against the 49ers, or the first half against the Jaguars in the playoffs, Davis was manned up, airtight against the other team's number 1 wide receiver, gets hands on them, jams them. They couldn't get anywhere. He was shutting guys down, just erasing guys. That has not been the case this year. So now they're going to put Dean Leonard out there. He is a former 6th or 7th round pick last year out of Ole Miss, a project, a developmental guy, another guy who's big and fast. He has had a hard time getting his head around, so he will draw pass interference penalties at times. We'll see how they use him. The Chargers are very zone heavy. It almost doesn't matter who they're playing. They're going to play quarters. They're going to give you big cushions, give you an opportunity to run your route and try to come up and tackle you. And they're bad tacklers in the secondary. So that's a really bad recipe for success.
So one of the things I noticed about the entire secondary, and it's interesting that he's making wholesale changes at exactly this time, but the yards per target numbers are some of the worst I've ever seen in one group. But here's the bigger problem. You mentioned Taylor and Davis as 2 guys, Jasir Taylor and Davis, who are going to lose playing time more than likely as the Chargers move forward this year. They're bad, but they're not that bad. I mean, Taylor's allowing 7.0 yards per target, Davis 7.5. It's the other players who are utterly terrible. Asante Samuel is at 9.7 yards per target this year. Derwin James at 9.9 yards per target this year. And Alohi Gilman is at 11.9 yards per, which is one of the highest figures I've ever seen at this point in the season. But it's truly awful. You mentioned, obviously, some of the things about Gilman. I saw he somehow had a very good coverage grade from PFF, which is like it's not matching up with what I'm seeing in terms of the metrics.
Not at all. No. So a lot of those yards per target numbers, I think, are directly related to how the Chargers go about covering. I mentioned they play a lot of quarters. They play a lot of cover six. I mean, you're going to be dumbfounded when you see the way they play coverage because not only are they playing off, but they're giving 12-yard cushions on 3rd and 2. I mean, they're terrified of giving up the big play, but all they do is give up the big play. They're out of position. There's confusion on the back end. Guys are knocking each other out of their zones. I mean, they are totally and completely and utterly lost with Brandon Staley's defense. They have not a clue what is going on, and they can't get off the field on 3rd and 15. They can't get off the field on 3rd and 20. They're either committing stupid penalties or they're just giving up chunk plays up the seam, down the sideline, middle of the field. It doesn't matter. Every blade of grass is open all the time. It is hands down the worst performing secondary in the league.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I'm sure Ravens fans will find that very optimistic from this. But the move of Derwin James back to nickel concerns the hell out of me in terms of what that would do for that defense. Let's talk about the off-ball linebackers, I guess, next in terms of who they have who generally does not line up on the line of scrimmage. And you mentioned they're more of a committed nickel team. Talk a little bit about those guys.
Yeah, I mean, the linebackers you're going to see for the vast majority of the snaps on Sunday are Kenneth Murray and Eric Kendricks. Murray, former first-round pick. He's a guy who Staley, at least among Chargers fans, famously said a couple years ago, he is our best coverage linebacker, which is not true. Murray's a fantastic athlete. You'd almost say he's a freakish athlete, explosive in a lot of ways. His tackling has improved, but he's always been a guy who was a high tackler, took questionable angles to the ball, and just missed a lot of tackles because he was trying to blow guys up and his ankles were bad. He's improved against the run. He's become something of a weapon as an extra rusher or a blitzer from that linebacker spot. Kendricks, obviously former Viking, been playing for a long, long time. Former All-Pro, that's not who he is anymore. Kendricks is slow. Simply put, teams are attacking Murray and Kendricks in space. They're putting them in a position to chase guys across the field, and they can't do it. So you're seeing big catch and run opportunities in the middle of the field because these guys can't cover. And even though Murray can run, their angles are bad, and they're just getting lost in coverage consistently. Kendricks is a guy who he'll flash every once in a while against the run. But he really has been kind of a net negative for the Chargers. They brought him in to wear the green dot, be the captain of the defense. He was hurt and I think had a family emergency or a death in the family or something early in the season. Murray took over the green dot, and I don't think he's relinquished it since Kendricks came back. Kendricks is a guy that, I mean, the Ravens are one of the best coach teams in the league. They're going to attack Kendricks left and right in the passing game. I'm sure we'll see Zay Flowers on him at times. I'm sure we'll see them just create matchups for Kendricks in space, and he's not going to be able to hang. So that's another big problem is it's not just the secondary that's struggling in coverage. The Chargers are not overly fast in the back end in the second and third levels of their defense. And they struggle with chasing and tackling. It's been an issue for a while, and it's really been a big problem this year.
Okay.
And that's pretty much all you'll see from the linebackers. They have other linebackers on the roster. Nick Neiman, former third-round pick, I think. Amin Ogbongbemiga, former UDFA out of Oklahoma State, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Special team standouts. They're both core special teamers. They don't play on defense really at all unless somebody's hurt, and they have to go out there. You'll see Neiman maybe, 10 snaps a game, something like that, but he's really not on the field all that often on defense.
Okay, fair enough. Now, the thing that really beat the Ravens in the 2018 playoff game, it's been a few years now. The Ravens had, a big win over the Chargers in the interim that could have gotten them over this, but you don't get over playoff losses as easily. Was that the Chargers just beat the hell out of the Ravens in the front four with some fairly pedestrian dudes. And Ingram was okay, but he's kind of an older pass rusher at the time. And, the group as a whole just overwhelmed the Ravens in that game. Who's the guy? I want to say Felot or who would be the guy I'm thinking of that has a PH in it?
Trying to think.
It'll come to me. Anyway, they got their asses handed to them basically by the front four of the Chargers, which caused Lamar Jackson a lot of trouble in his first year when he wasn't the passer he is now. That got them a big lead, caused turnovers, and basically cost the Ravens a chance to move on in a season where they had a pretty darn good team. How is that defensive line now has Khalil Mack? Any word on Joey Bosa, first of all, of his injury?
He's on the IR. If he comes back at all this year, it'll be very late in the season. So he's not a factor in this game. So yeah, their defensive line, obviously they have Khalil Mack, defensive end, outside linebacker, whatever you want to call him. They drafted Tuli Pelotu out of USC this year, who has been phenomenal. I think he has 4 or 5 sacks this year. He's been very good at setting the edge. It seems like at least once or twice a game, he steps up and either gets a sack or makes a play in the running game. He's been outstanding. I know for me, he's far exceeded my expectations in his rookie year. He's been very, very good. Let's see the rest of their defensive line. They've got Sebastian Joseph Day at defensive tackle, Austin Johnson at defensive tackle. They're the guys who are primarily on the field in base defense. They have Morgan Fox, who is primarily he's a defensive end who plays defensive tackle. They use him in the twist and stunt game. He is part of their, quote unquote NASCAR package in obvious passing situations. Otito Ogbonnia, who they drafted last year out of USC. He's another guy. He's 320-pound defensive tackle who plays some end. Fox, I knew I was going to screw this up. Ogbonnia. I got Ogbonniga and Ogbonnia confused, but Ogbonnia, he and Fox are going to play somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 snaps a game, and then you'll see Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson playing somewhere in the neighborhood of about 40 snaps a game.
So pretty significant rotation on the interior of that defensive line. They activate 5 on game day usually, or even go to 6.
Let's see. They'll usually have 5. They also have a draft pick this year, I believe, 5th round draft pick, Scott Matlock out of Boise State, who will also get some snaps. He was playing a lot when Ogbonnia got hurt. Not playing as much now, but he's generally out there too.
Do they have any kick inside edges that would legitimately be called an outside line, a 3-4 outside linebacker, or basically that are guys who can take defensive line snaps away on passing downs?
Well, I would say they deploy Khalil Mack and Tuli Pelotu in a variety of ways. They both stand up on the edge. They'll both play inside on obvious passing downs. They'll have the two of them on the same side of the line of scrimmage, on the same side of the line, I should say, and they'll run stunts and twists with them to get to the quarterback. So those two guys are pretty flexible. They can kick inside, play outside. Like I said, Morgan Fox is a guy who they call him a defensive tackle. He's kind of a tweener. He's a small defensive tackle, kind of a big defensive end, very effective in the line game part of the game, kind of a speed interior rusher, if you will.
All right, very good. I guess the most general question I can ask, and we're running kind of long here, but this has been great stuff. Really appreciate this, Jamie, is how do you expect them to defend what the Ravens bring to the table? So the Ravens' major weapons right now are obviously Jackson, as it's always been, Flowers in the passing game, Bateman now coming back in the passing game a little bit. Beckham had a big game last week, but I wouldn't call him a really enormous weapon. He's one of the guys, he's kind of a constant kind of slot receiver that the Ravens will show you. And then the big addition to the offense recently is Keaton Mitchell, the speed guy. How do the Chargers go about defending that?
I wish I could tell you. They haven't defended anybody all season. So how they're going to defend those guys, I don't know. I mean, I would assume is Zay Flowers mostly playing out of the slot? Is that
some slots, some Z? They do a little bit of both with him. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we know Derwin's going to be in the slot playing the star. They'll move him around a little bit. I would expect him to try to match up with Zay whenever he can, which is a little scary. We like Derwin in the slot, but he's had a little issue with some change of direction things. I think some of the injuries have taken their toll on him a little bit. So we'll see how he handles Zay in space. That'll be a really key matchup. I would think I don't know what they're going to do with the secondary. I mean, I know who's going to be on the field. It's hard to say they're going to play quarters and they're going to play cover 6. That's just what they do. There's not a whole lot of flexibility. You're probably not going to see a whole lot of press man just because of the competition and the rotations they're going to have on the field. They're probably going to try to simplify it by playing even more zone, which generally means we're going to let you catch the ball and hopefully we're going to tackle you. Okay. They've struggled stopping the run. They've struggled stopping the pass, and they've struggled getting the quarterback at times. So we'll see what happens. I'm not overly optimistic about this game because I know how well coached the Ravens are, and I feel like they're going to have a game plan. They're probably going to run the ball down the Chargers' throats, and they're going to have some success with big plays in the passing game because that's just what the Chargers do. They give up big plays, even though the whole defense is designed not to.
Okay, well, it is typical that most opponents of the Ravens will play a lot of zone because they want to keep eyes on Jackson in terms of that. But the other possibility is that they make heavy use of a spy. Who would Murray be the guy who'd be the natural spy for Jackson in a game like this?
Probably. It might be some combination of Murray and Derwin at times. Okay. Would be my guess.
Okay, very good. Okay, well, I don't do score predictions on this show because I always hate it when other people ask me score predictions on their show. But if you'd like, pick one player on the defense and one player on the offense who you think matches up well against the Ravens.
I'm going to say, on offense, it's Keenan. He's the best player on offense. He's the guy that if they're doing anything offensively, it's going to run through him for the most part. So I'll say Keenan. I think they're going to find ways to help him find favorable matchups and catch the ball in space. It's just what he does. In terms of defense, I would say I'm going to say Khalil Mack just because he's been playing some really good football really since the Raider game when he had that 6-sack game. He's been playing really well. He's been dynamite against the run, and he's been rushing the passer really well. So I think those are the guys I go with.
High probability. Khalil Mack usually on that rush side, so he seeks out the uncovered tackle.
They move him around. He'll play on both sides. Yeah.
Okay. So that's interesting. Khalil Mack absolutely petrifies me in this game because I don't know how much you know, but the Ronnie Stanley is out right now, and they have a backup short arm left tackle who's had a lot of trouble with some speed guys over the course of his career. He's been a reasonable NFL backup tackle at this point, but he had a couple of absolutely terrible games against Myles Garrett. And so a lot of people have bad games versus Myles Garrett, but if you're facing Khalil Mack, you're looking for a close comp, it might be somebody like Garrett, who is maybe a half level above, but still a great pass rusher, certainly in terms of what Mack brings. Jamie, you've been a great guest. Tell folks here where they can find your work, or maybe talk football online if they had a question about the Chargers.
Yeah, you can find me at lightning_round. That's the handle for our podcast, the Lightning Round podcast. We do 5 shows a week. We have our after hours on Sundays after the games. My partner Garrett does a show called Score More. We have a mailbag show on Tuesday. Score More's on Wednesday. Thursday, I do my preview shows for that upcoming week. And then our partner Craig does a show on Friday. So check us out. We're on YouTube. You can find us at Lightning Round Podcast on YouTube. And we are on the Fans First Sports Network.
Fans first. Gotcha.
Yep.
And is this podcast doubling as your own preview for the Chargers game this week?
Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. No sense in doing two shows. So yeah, if you could send me a link, I will definitely get that out to our Discord and on Twitter, and we'll drive some traffic to it.
All right. Outstanding. Great show, Jamie. Really appreciate having you on. Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a film study short, hit me up. We've got a half week. We've got a bye week coming after this, and would love to hear from any new people who have an idea they're passionate about that the Baltimore Ravens should try. I'll get back to you very quickly. If you DM me, they're always open on Twitter. Jamie, thanks again for coming on.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
We'll talk to you next time on Film Study.